All right, I am back. It is Sunday night. It is just after 8 p.m. here in Tejas. Salty Dog in the house. What's going on? Salty Dog 72. Rita Perea, one of my favorite people, right there. T. Jordan, what's happening? Just chilling with some Beck. This is some Beck. You know, I like Beck. It's got a few disturbing videos. But I like Beck. I ran into Beck one night in Hollywood. You know, if you haven't seen the Friday show with Masaki, I highly recommend it. We get into sort of tales from the dark side in Hollywood and Southern California, and we talk a lot about a lot of this stuff. And there was one night I was. It was kind of an interesting night. I was at this. It was a trippy night. There was this band called 07, and they were sort of this down tempo outfit. Put out 2 records. The first record is tremendous, and I think probably the best thing that came out of 07 was Sia, the singer Sia. A lot of you are familiar with it. Man, you know, some unusual videos. I think one of 2 of her videos were kind of disturbing. Her father was a member of the group Men at Work, and while the band wasn't there, we had seen the band, or I'd seen the band earlier in the week in San Diego, and they were fantastic. But one of the guys from 07 was spinning and playing records at this club in LA. And so I sided up to the bar and got a couple of cocktails, and I started talking to this young woman, very cool. And it was this Sia, the singer from 07. Very nice young lady. And, you know, I guess she had a pretty good solo career. I don't know what she's doing now. But then Beck was there, and Beck was just kind of walking around and sort of, you know, by himself, and nobody bothered him. And that's the weird thing about LA. I would see people quite a bit in Los Angeles who were famous or semi-famous. One time I ran into this guy who was on one of those reality TV shows where they're stuck on an island. And he was like one of the most annoying people I've ever seen on a reality TV show. I think it was like Love Island or some shit like that. And it was a very odd moment. I was sitting outside of this cafe. I was waiting for my friend to get home. We're going to go out and hang out. So I'm just sitting there. I think it was maybe having coffee or wine or something. And this car rolls up next to the cafe. And these 2 guys jump out. And one of them is this guy from this reality TV show. And they jump out and they sit down at this table, and they're like, you know, very intense about something, like having some kind of intense meeting or something, you know. And he was very cognizant of people knowing who he might have been, because he was clocking me because I was kind of clocking him. And I guess if you're he wasn't even like a C-list celebrity. He was like a D-list celebrity at that point. But I guess if you're a D-list celebrity and you're kind of a geeky douche on a reality TV show, you try to get as much mileage out of that as possible. But that stuff would always happen to me when I would go to LA. So it would always be like some weird connection with somebody semi well-known or well-known. One night, I think it might have been the same night actually, with my friend, we great guy, Josh Jacobs, wonderful guy, super guy. And so we went to this party. It wasn't like a private party. It was more like like a club sort of thing, but it wasn't really like a club. It was kind of odd. Semi-party, semi-club. It was all kind of, you know, DJ scene stuff. And David Faustino was there. You know, the guy from Married with Children. He was there. He was right in front of us the whole time, hanging out with his buddy. And so you'd run into people like this in LA, or at least I would, quite a bit. I think, you know, and I think that was I think that was the night where Josh took me to this 420 deal. It was a 420 party. Now you have to remember now, I don't really partake in that world, all right? I don't really partake in that world. But we roll into this place, and it's like a shop. And it was probably about, I don't know, 2:30 in the morning or something. I think when I'm sleeping at his house. So we roll into this place, and the shop is closed in the front. But we go into the back, and this place is freaking bumping. I mean, just bumping. There were people. It was kind of wall to wall, but not so wall to wall that you couldn't like it wasn't like claustrophobic. And they had a band there, and they were just jamming on some funk. And I remember this a 420 night. So I had my first experience with vaporized 420 that night. And it was a very interesting experience, to say the least. Very interesting. I remember talking with this young woman, and I was just kind of absolutely, I had that consciousness shift and alteration. And I'm pretty good at seeing into people, even when I'm not in that place. But in the past, when I would go to that place, I would see too much. And man, I saw some like really powerful feminine energy in this woman. And I was like, okay, what am I going to do about this shit? All right, let's get on with this. There's my man, Akita Faustino, just played pickup b-ball games at my school. We know he wasn't playing center. He's a tiny dude. I guess he became known for like picking people up. Like he became one of those sort of player gurus. We got Justice. There's my man Akita, also known as Masaki. Masaki, I heard you're set with. Oh, look who's here. The orange one, the big Cheetos here. There he is. The Astro Cat making an appearance. There he is. I'm inside tonight. Decide to just chill out here in the inner realms. But Masaki, I heard that your DJ set on Conspiracy Cocktail was epic. The lovely and talented Joan S. I'm just looking for info into the Sky Clock. Oh, you'll get some tonight. We're gonna do some chart of the moment stuff, and I'm also gonna look at profiles and fascism. There's Judy. What's going on, Judy? 10 Dragon. Lindsay, nice to see you. Sandra Wells, what's going on, cuz? Teresa Profont, Lils, J.R. Williams. 110 degrees in LA. The fires in California are awful right now. Joe Mama, good to see you. I haven't seen you around for a bit. Maybe I haven't been looking. Susan Bull, what's going on from the prison state of Victoria? Yep. Jennifer Rubin, is it Saturday or is it Sunday? What year is it? What time is it? Who are you? Where are your past lives? Ani Brito, good to see you, Ani, the wench with the wrench. We got some more comments here. Michael M. There's Faith. It's okay to be an orange cat. Just tell Trump that. I began on medical marijuana. This stuff for kids nowadays is way too strong. Oh, boy. 108 in Sacramento and Smoky. Let's see. Yeah, well, there's Danica Rose. James Provenzano. What's going on? Nathaniel Graham. Yes, cannabis opens the doors. Some are not comfortable with that experience. Well, I was I had my fill of that a long time ago. Long time ago. Let's do some woo-woo tonight. Ooh, okay. There's Mary Grether. What's going on? Yeah, Jasper is trying to get in on this broadcast. But right now, you're getting a lot of his ass at this point. You got to figure out where you want to go, man. You got to figure out where it is. Now, let me move over. You can have your spot. How's that? You can have your little spot over here. We're going to get going here tonight. We got a lot to cover. Came off of really kind of epic webinar yesterday. If you didn't go and attend, I'm going to make that available on my website. And you'll be able to download that. It's about 4 hours worth of hardcore information around Gemini, around Mercury, around relocation. You get it all. You get it all. And there were about 35, 40 people in the webinar. And I know a lot of people signed up, but weren't able to attend. That's coming at you. I will have a link in the description of this show for next week's webinar, which is for the next 4 months. You're gonna want to be a part of that webinar next week on Saturday. And the reason why is because I'm going to break it all down. I am going to break the next 4 months down, basically from here to the beginning of your 3 months. This is what you're gonna get all the info. You're gonna month by month by month and sort of the big forecast. I'm gonna get into some of that tonight. I'm gonna give you one prediction tonight. It's based on Mars that you're going to want to stick around for. I literally tripped for 2.5 hours saying Rick Simpson oil. That stuff is no joke. It was very healing. Oh, good. We like the healing part. So let's get going. I'm going to say the little prayer here. All right. Should I put up a cool image while I do this prayer thing? Should I do that? How about something neutral? Should I do something neutral? Something not so religious. Well, this is from the, let's do this. Kind of like this. Let's do this. All right. Got my PDF up from yesterday. Here we go. This is a pretty cool image. Pretty neutral image. But one I think that's a little big. Here we go. You guys should be able to see that. There it is. There it is. Maybe I can just get out of the way here. Let's try this and I'll come back. Can I do that? There we go. I'll just get right out of the way. Okay, here we go. Look at the vastness of space, the infinity of the cosmic mind. Dear blessed and holy Father, Mother God of the great central sun within the universal light, which is the light of Yeshua Sananda Emmanuel, the one that runs through each and every one of us. We ask that only the highest and best information, truth, and wisdom come through this channel at this time. And as a result, that we are all blessed and graced with intelligence, strength, fortitude, elasticity, receptivity, humor, kindness, endurance, commitment, and above all, love. We ask that any karmic residue be cleansed, purified, clarified, and removed so that we may return to our lives as we entered this experience sovereign. All right, let's get going. A lot of heavy Mars energy out there. You know, the Mars is really cranking up. We're at those final degrees of Mars. You know, the 27th and 28th degree of whenever a planet's at those final 2 degrees, the energy just gets really staticky, like just incredibly staticky. And we're seeing now this like intense staticky Mars energy. And I'm sure you guys have been keeping your eyes on Rochester, New York, and what's been going on there over the weekend. The fires in California, you know, that's heavy Mars energy. That's Mars in Aries, you know, and Mars is like super close to the planet, right? This is one of the things that Heather and I talked about in our discussion that is over on her channel. I'm going to put it up on my channel. So I think part 2 is coming out. And one of the things that we talked about is the actual geocosmic proximity of Mars. Steve Crimmy sent me a picture last night with Mars literally just sitting right on top of the full moon, or well, it's just after the full moon, right? So we're just past that, you know, and but it's in Aries, so we have Mars Moon conjunction. You could actually see that in the night sky last night. So you know, Mars was the crown of the moon, and you know, just from a Star Watcher's perspective, it was pretty. We couldn't see it here last night because We've been having some rain, heavy rain for the last 2 days, on and off. But it was there, and you could actually physically see this thing. It was kind of amazing, and that's what we've been dealing with. We've been dealing with this heavy Mars energy, and you know, it's right now. It's like been in square with Saturn, and heavy Saturn square, big time Saturn square. But the proximity of Mars, you know, to the planet, it, you know, in Aries is it's a hot motherfucker, right? Mars in Aries is a hot motherfucker, and it is very close, right? Very, very close. This is the closest Mars has been to the planet in a while, and it will. It's going to be very close in its proximity, you know, between now and you know, through the station and the retrograde of Mars, which happens on the 10th of September. So one day before the anniversary of 9/11, which of course is not happening, just like everything else that's really not happening or hasn't happened this year, the year of cancel. It's not just cancel culture, it's cancel everything. Although they are playing college football now, which is quite interesting, except for the Big Ten and the Pac-12, who are not playing college football, but there are a lot of other teams and schools that are not really watching a lot of football these days, nor am I watching a lot of sports. So, you know, but again, I do follow these things, and the next great star, the NBA, Giannis Antetokounmpo, apparently is having a very terrible series down in the bubble, and it looks like the Milwaukee Bucks, who are one of the odds-on favorites to actually win whatever kind of title they're playing for, are going to probably lose. And it's interesting because Giannis is a Sagittarius, and with the South Node in Sagittarius, it's really just not a great time for him. Like, you know, this is where Sagittarians are being really challenged right now. And it's no coincidence that a lot of my clients these days happen to be Sagittarians. So last year when the South Node was in Capricorn, who had a really shitty season? Well, it was LeBron James, who happens to be a Capricorn. Now, but again, I'm not really, I just follow these things peripherally at this point. It's not like it's a hobby of mine, because I used to be a really big sports guy, but just like everything else, it's become tainted and politicized. And it doesn't really matter how it's been tainted or politicized. And even when sports was, you know, swinging right during the Bush era, and it was all about this faux patriotism, and every moment, every single moment of every sporting event, it was God bless America, right? God bless America, seventh inning of every fucking baseball game. I was like, you got to be kidding me. Aren't you getting enough mileage out of this thing already? I mean, you're already doing flyovers for the Star Spangled Banner. That was that was the time, like I said, I wasn't really comfortable with, because it was just, to me, just pure propaganda. Just like we're seeing pure propaganda now. It's the same thing. And they just will move the herd, and you know, wherever they want to move the herd. Right? So we're going to try to look at some of that tonight during tonight's show. But I think Mars is really the, you know, this is the talking point. Mars is the talking point. I'm going to bring up the chart of the moment. I may have to move a few things around here, but let's just get right into that, and then I'm going to look at a few interesting characters. I'm not sure how long I'm going to go tonight, but I'm going to try and bring up as much vital information as possible. So let's see, where are we? Let's do this. Yeah, Mars is right there at 28. You know, whenever you see, like, there are so many major events that happen right around 28 degrees. So if you go back to 2011, when Fukushima happened, if I'm not mistaken, what was it? Neptune was, let's see, it was Uranus. Uranus was in Pisces at right around 28 degrees before it went into Aries. Yeah. And then Neptune was in Aquarius, I think it was right around 29. So when you get into both of those, you're dealing with water, you're dealing with this radical kind of seismic energy with Uranus and the connections with uranium, and of course the Daiichi Prefecture and Fukushima. It was all with those outer planets getting ready to shift. The energy was really, really jumpy. So you go back and you could look at, and I've done this before, where planets change, like the outer planets change, and they're at that 27th and 28th degree. The energy is like kind of all over the place. And then it hits that 29th degree, and then there's nothing, right? It's like a flat screen or blank screen. And then it goes to 0, and then it just, it's like a new star all over again. All right, let me just do this quickly here. All right, I'm going to change the little location. By the way, I'm hearing crazy, crazy tales of people moving. Again, we're in the time of movement, true note in Gemini. Crazy times. I was watching this this one YouTube channel. His name was is it Bill Alex Serco? And anyway, he was talking about, he lives in Fort Worth. He seems like an interesting guy. He was talking about people in California. They want to leave California so bad. They cannot get a U-Haul truck. They cannot get a U-Haul truck in California. And if they can, it is so expensive for a U-Haul truck that they will actually drive to Nevada. And they will pick up the truck in Nevada and they will drive it back to California. Because nobody's moving from Nevada to California. I can tell you that right now. And then they're picking up their stuff, and then they're leaving. So this is how intense it's getting in terms of California. San Francisco, saw another show tonight. There was it's almost half of the businesses in San Francisco. I think it's 40%. 40% of the businesses in San Francisco are closed. Think about that. And London Breed, who is yet another Willie Brown protege, London Breed, instead of helping businesses stay open or create new businesses, London Breed has, what do we got here? In London Breed in the city of San Francisco are essentially, this is it right here. This is it. Yeah, this is it. They're essentially helping business close. How crazy is that? How crazy is that? This is what's going on. They're helping businesses close. What is really the subtext here? Right? If they've got 40% of their businesses leaving, that's crazy. 40%. What is really going on there? Are they emptying out the city so that perhaps somebody else or some other group can occupy that city? It seems to be that there is a strategy to this. It seems to be a strategy. If you are just witnessing the flight, and it's not just, maybe middle class or slightly upper middle class people, anybody that can get out of California, to some extent Oregon and to some extent Washington, are leaving. I think California is the one that's really got the most heat on it. And I was on a website reading some comments, and apparently somebody was from central Utah, and they were noticing that there were a number of planes, jet planes, big jet planes, that were coming into this airport in central. It's this one area in Utah, which is kind of in a bowl, sort of central, sort of north, kind of northeast of Salt Lake City. And they were noticing all these big private jets flying big. We're not talking little, two engine little small Airstreams. We're talking big, like the jets that John Travolta would fly, because John Travolta is a pilot. And that's what we're talking about. And they were coming in large numbers, which means that there are people not only getting ready to populate that area, but they're populating that area together. So it seems like there's a concerted effort now. What's happening now is going to change the geographic course of history in this country in a pretty significant way. As you know, the coastal population moves inward, and one has to think if this is not in some ways intentional, right? That maybe they're emptying out these states and these cities for a number of different reasons. They're just making it so hard to live there so that people do leave. And then the question is, well, why is that? Is it because perhaps they want those places to be occupied by somebody else? Possibly. And if that's the case, well, then who? Question mark. Yeah, and this gets into some of the stuff that we talked about with the reset. And when I say reset, I'm not talking about the World Economic Forum version of the reset, although it is kind of a subtext of that, or like a subcategory. When I talk reset, I'm talking kind of classic Tartarian reset. And if you're not familiar with Tartaria, which I've spoken about kind of at length here on this channel and my other channel, but primarily this one, and I have a show called The Astrology of the Reset, and the reset being 1851. And one of the things that really grabbed me when you look at that period, which is supposedly the Tartarian period, or at least the time where the inheritors begin to populate these kind of found locations, is there are two common outer planet themes happening: Uranus and Taurus and Neptune and Pisces. If I'm not mistaken, in that 1851 period, the true node is also in Cancer, which we saw last year. So all those elements, three fairly significant elements that lead up to that version of the reset, were in play last year, two of which are still happening right now. And again, what happened with those ancient structures? What happened with those cities? Where did those people go? Were they liquefied? Were they buried under 20, 30 feet of dirt, which had become liquefied and is becoming mud? What about the fires in California? People being displaced by fires now in record numbers. I mean, now we've got a whole new, it's like every year now there's the seasonal burn in California. And I lived there for a number of years, and we would have these major fires, maybe once every, 4 or 5 years. If you haven't lived through a major fire, it is terrifying. It is terrifying. It is more terrifying than a major snowstorm or a freeze. It is much more terrifying because things happen very quickly, very, very quickly. And I'll never forget, back in 2003, there were these huge fires in San Diego, and they're all over the place. And I would drive down the freeway, and there'd be a freaking fire in the middle of the freeway. It was insane. So we're seeing this now, and the area around San Bernardino, Yucaipa, is being evacuated. Now, what's interesting about Yucaipa is that that's one of the areas, if you go back and you look at that kind of early June period where all this shit was erupting, Yucaipa essentially kicked Antifa out of their town. But you know, you have to ask yourself, well, is that payback, or is that just part of what's happening in California? Whatever. It's interesting that area, which was not once but twice, by the way, twice, that they were essentially not very welcome to these outside forces. I'm going to talk about Antifa tonight and look at some astrological references with Antifa, historical. Some of them are quite interesting, actually. So, again, the fires are moving people out of there. It's not the same as the liquefaction of dirt and mud and burying structures and perhaps people underneath those structures, but it is probably perhaps equally as effective in some way. And it is leading to this mass migration. And it's going to be very, very interesting how all this sort of settles, if it does settle. All right, well, let's look at what we got here. Right now, as of tonight, we have Aries on the ascendant. We got Chiron. Chiron's going to be a player. We're going to talk about Chiron in one of the charts I'm going to bring up tonight. Here's that Mars right there, and it's beginning to slow down. And in 3 days, so 4 days, it's going to go retrograde on the 8th, and right around the 9th. The 9th, 8th, 9th, it's going to start to station. And the station of a celestial body is always a very interesting time. There's like this strange kind of calm before the storm in some ways when a planet stations. And then as it moves backwards, right, when it moves backwards, then you can begin to see some very theoretical, interesting effects when that actually occurs. But that station period is an interesting one. You know, it's just like, okay, here we go. We're getting ready to crank the celestial machine backwards. So I have some thoughts on Mars retrograde, and it's one of the things I'll be covering in the webinar on Saturday, and it actually is connected to tonight's topic, and I'm going to get into what I think how Mars retrograde will manifest as we look at some of these older charts, or these charts that are related to the inception of Antifa and the various incarnations, because it's not like it was just like, okay, it was here, and then that's when it started. You'll see when we get into this, quite interesting. You can also see right now where we have the square with Mars, with Saturn. And one of the things that I talked about is that separating. Talked about this last week when Mars was separated away from Saturn, that we would have kind of more lawlessness, maybe more vigilantism, some Paul Kersey, the Paul Kersey effect. If you know Death Wish, you know Paul Kersey. That movie affected me when I was a kid. I remember watching Death Wish for the first time. It was on TV. I didn't see the movie. I saw it on TV. And I had a pellet gun. And I remember like going out after that movie, and I lived in suburban San Jose. Nobody's going to do anything. But I took my pellet gun out. Man, I was looking for street criminals. Street criminals after I watched that movie. Talk about programming. Holy shit. So we've got this Mars, and it's separating from Saturn, and we've seen it. We've seen this kind of, we saw it when the guy in Portland was killed. You know, one of the Trump people going to Portland, which I don't agree with, by the way. I really don't agree with that. Why? Why would you set that up? Why would you do that? Why would you really put yourself into harm's way in a place like that? And completely outnumber. It's just really, that was a bad career move. And then, of course, what's his name? Michael Roloff, the guy who shot him. Well, he was taken out. He was taken out by federal marshals. And the weird thing about that was that apparently he had done some interview with Vice magazine. And Vice magazine, because they were able to kind of triangulate on this interview, they found out where he was in Lacey, Washington. And so once they were able to triangulate on that Vice magazine interview, they went in and they got him. Apparently he resisted it. This is the story. Venus just moved into Leo. It was in Cancer for quite, a while, because we had a very slow, we had that retrograde. Remember, Venus went into retrograde right at where the true node is at 25 degrees. But retrograde back to 4, and then it moved in. It sort of picked up some momentum. Was in Cancer, and now we have Venus 0 Leo, and hey, Venus and Leo is good for love, right? Love, affection, poetry, hobbies. Enjoy something. This is a time where enjoying things is difficult. It's a difficult time to enjoy some stuff, right? It's not easy. It's not easy, but it's important. It is important to carve out a little bit of enjoyment. You have to carve out a little bit of enjoyment. You have to feed your soul, or else you're going to be just a dried up piece of beef jerky. I mean, look, you've got to also prepare. I'm a big preparedness person. You've got to prepare. It's important. It's an important project right now. And when I say prepare, there's a lot of different ways you can prepare. And I think that's been a problem with this culture in general. We have not prepared. Aside from sort of the freaky deaky hardcore preppers that they would show on the Discovery Channel or something like that, right? They'd show these people. It's like some of them were kind of nuts and some of them were kind of interesting. That's one version of it. That's one version of it. But that's the extreme kind of media version. And it is a version which is important. But what I'm really referring to is mindset, the preparation and the mindset that we've lost touch with, that has been completely fractalized and atomized, and there's an intentionality around preparation that we've lost touch with. And those things go along with discipline and order and some structure. And we have gone through a period and cycle, very long period and cycle, where it was completely Dionysian. And I've talked about this before, and we're moving out of that Dionysian phase. When we look at when Saturn was in Capricorn, like in, 1988, 89, 90. Okay, so in 1990, when Saturn is in kind of the final degrees of Capricorn and getting ready to move into Aquarius, this is when grunge starts. And I was in Seattle when grunge was really starting to take off. And Neptune was also in Capricorn at that time. And it was an interesting phenomenon. And Pluto in 1990 was in, where were we? It was, let's see, we were in, Pluto is in, it was in Capricorn, right? Scorpio, it was in Scorpio. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of a, Pluto was in Scorpio in 1990. Scorpio. So we have deep Scorpio. It's the beginning. It's starting the beginning of that Neptune-Uranus conjunction in Capricorn. And but Saturn was there too. And this is where grunge starts. And grunge is kind of the end of this punk era. But or it's not really the end, but it's kind of the apotheosis of the punk era. It starts with the Sex Pistols, kind of ends with Nirvana in some ways. And what happens also during that time is that we're in very deep Dionysus. We're lost in Dionysian energy during that period. This is sort of the peak Dionysian time, which really starts in the 1960s. And the 90s were the 60s backwards. If you think about it, they kind of are. So we're in this very deep Dionysian period. Heroin is off the charts. Heroin is huge during the 90s. Like this sister morphine. It is really sort of it's the narcoticized, sort of death cult of the Dionysian culture in the 90s. And then we have on the other side of that, we have really the rise of methamphetamine, bathtub meth. And then we have things like crack. Crack is really huge. Crack cocaine is very big during the early 90s. So we have all these convergences of this very Dionysic phase, sort of the 60s inverted. 60s were psychedelic and expansion of consciousness, and the 90s were not that at all. The 90s were a very, very dark phase. And even from a numerological perspective, and Masaki probably talked about this in chat, it's the end of something, right? It's the end. And we didn't know what was going on with the 2000s. Now, in that early 90s phase, like late 80s, early 90s, you see the beginnings of this kind of ecstatic culture, which is coming out of England. And instead of LSD, it's ecstasy. And it's sort of, again, this recycling of this Dionysic phase. But it's a very interesting version of that. Like in the 60s, there weren't like, MDMA gangs or MDMA mafias. And in England, they were. If you were hanging out at the hacienda, you were buying your drugs from gangsters. Like they were selling you your drugs. And that was not the case during the 1960s. It was the CIA that was selling your drugs. Now, that's a side note. But that was going on in the 90s. So again, it was sort of this recycling and respinning in the rave part of it, which was really driven a lot by MDMA versus lysergic acid. The phthalimate was, again, a part of this kind of retelling of this deeper Dionysic phase. And that really kind of lasts up through the early 2000s, and we hit 2001, 9/11, 2001, and there's this shock. And it's a major ritual that takes place and throws people into a whole other state of trauma. And that period really lasts up until about I would say 2015, 2016. And as Trump begins to emerge, we've really been through this kind of very, very dark void. The 2000s, from Bush to Obama is this dark void. And, it's coming out of that, the sort of the apotheosis of this Dionysic period. And through that dark void, people are trying to find themselves. Ayahuasca begins to emerge. DMT begins to emerge. The psychedelic culture. Joe Rogan begins to pop up a little bit. It's not quite like the 60s at all. It's a subculture, really. But this phase is ending, right? So right around 2016, when Donald Trump starts to come onto the scene, people are ready for something different. And really what they're ready for is this kind of more Apollonian kind of exposure, this more Apollonian process, which is moving away from this kind of dark spell or the spell of the dark Dionysic, right? This is it's not quite the poison apple, but it's close. And now we're coming out of that. And this is what's, and Stoicism begins to become, fairly popular. You have the emergence of the alt-right, and, these things begin to emerge during this time. And we're still kind of in that period right now. We're kind of in this, Apollonian period, or this, this phase, of this kind of solar energy, but it feels like it's the clash of solar energies now. And that we're dealing with like two suns, right? Which is very much like Gemini. So we're dealing with two suns. We're dealing with, our theoretical sun, and we're dealing with this idea of the black sun or the Saturnian sun, which is really typified by Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter, right? This whole powerful trinity of Capricorn. And this gets back to what I was talking about, or have been talking about for a while, which is the purple revolution. and the Purple Revolution really starting the day after Trump got elected. You go back, and I've played the videos. Hillary and Bill are wearing purple. They're wearing purple. This is their new code. This is their color, and it was 202 days. 202 days between the death of Prince and the election of Donald Trump. So we have the 22, we have the 2 2s, right? 202. So, and then we have all the symbolism with the Twin Cities and Prince and the Revolution. And I've covered this before. So what are we talking about? We're talking about purple. And here, when we have Saturn and Pluto together, this has been a very powerful Plutonian, Saturnian cycle that we're in. And at one point, and I've talked about this before, that the theory was that the original sun in our solar system was actually Saturn. And Saturn was the black sun. And there's a whole cult of the black sun. And now we have this blinding white sun, right? Which is, I think, kind of replaced the warmer yellow sun. But we have Saturn as the black sun. And again, theoretically, what it did is it emitted a purple light that reached the planet. And there was a whole different kind of atmosphere. There's a whole different atmosphere. There's a whole different biosphere during that time. So we're now in a time where with Gemini, right? With Gemini, the true to the Gemini, it's like the clash of these two solar energies. One, this Saturnian, the dark Saturnian energy, the hyper black cube, and then this other energy, which tends to be more sort of Apollonian, and this kind of white light, right? Our sun has become bright white, and then we have this black sun. And now we see sort of this clash, this kind of ideological and galactic clash of these theoretical two forms of light. We also have the binary sun, or the binary star, or the binary sun, which happens to be Sirius B, which is a whole other discussion, which is in what about right around 14 or 15 Cancer, right? So this is an interesting time. So we have this rise of this kind of Apollonian energy, and it's connected to the sun, right? Apollo, the sun god. But it's also this kind of this Saturnian energy that's going on. It feels like there's this kind of cosmic struggle going on between these two forces of light, and one pretends to be some form of order, and the other pretends to be some form of action versus that order, which I'll get into. So I think this is really the narrative of where we are now, right? This is really the narrative. It is really this kind of galactic sort of tug of war between these two versions of the sun, or two versions of the light. And again, we've seen all the purple energy, and when Prince died, the world was bathed in purple illumination. I remember being at a Duran Duran concert, and Nile Rodgers opened for Duran Duran. He's great, by the way. And at one point, the whole space, was an open amphitheater, was filled with purple light. And I know that was going around the planet. Like it was like this initiation into this purple light, and into this kind of the gate of the black sun. And we saw it again with George Floyd, right? When George Floyd theoretically died, we saw the planet, was again bathed in this purple light. That is a black sun ritual. That's a total black sun ritual. So this is where we are. It's the clash of these two solar forces, or these two solar deities. And we're seeing that with the true node in Gemini. Now we do have Mars. Let's go back to Mars here. We do have Mars in conflict with Saturn and in Pluto. And I think Mars is pretty neutral, actually. It's militaristic. It's radical. I wouldn't say it's radical. It is militaristic. and it is action oriented. And everybody, last week I've been on my weekday show and say, just do something, right? That was like Mars. I was having Mars moments last week. Do something. And I'm still kind of there. You do need to do something. But what you don't need to do is you don't need to throw yourself into the fire. That is not bright. It's not bright. And it's unfortunate that Kyle Rittenhouse had to, or did do what he did. And I covered his chart last week. And I feel like a lot of what he did was the manifestation of a kind of a collective sort of lurch, right? I mean, this is what's going on with that generation that has Pluto and Sagittarius with the Neptune square right here in Pisces. Remember, even though it's separating, if you were born even with like Pluto and Sag, let's say 9 degrees, you're in that Neptune-Pluto square. If you were born with Pluto and Sag at 28 degrees, right, you're in that square. So that's a pretty big swath, right? Excuse me, with that square. So I feel like what he did was in some ways this kind of very symbolic act that was manifested. You know, it was like a collective act that was manifested through him. Got to do something with that Pluto-Neptune square. So it'll be interesting to see, you know, how all that unfolds. And that square is still happening. So, you know, was he kind of this individual outlet for a generation? Maybe, I don't know. Or would he be a trigger, an instigator, and a catalyst for others in his generation? Maybe. I think we're about to find out. But it's the Mars story right now, and getting ready to go retrograde and go backwards. And it will wind up, I think it goes back to what, about 14, 15 degrees, right? So it goes back into that trine with Jupiter, and that's going to be heavy action, right? That's going to be heavy action. So, you know, when Jupiter is in play, what do you get? You get, I'm sorry, square. That's more. It's more of everything. And, you know, we haven't seen any real massive presence of troops on the streets. We've seen sporadic snippets. Like they've sort of cranked up the action a bit in Portland recently. But if you go back and you look at some of the riots in the 1970s and some of the riots here in the 1960s, but riots in the 70s, you know, globally, and even recently, I think with some of the yellow vest stuff, they would bring out the water hoses. They bring out the water cannons, and they would just hit people with high pressure water and knock them back about, you know, 30 or 40 feet with these high pressure hoses. A very effective deterrent, by the way. We haven't seen any of that. We saw a little bit of the LRAD action in Kenosha, not much. And certainly they didn't crank it up to the level that they could have. I can tell you that right now, because those people were still within mostly hailing distance of those LRADs. And they weren't going full ear bleed on those LRADs. But it was painful enough to get their attention, but not so painful that they would be completely running in the opposite direction. And they certainly didn't have the MRAPs, which are the microwave transmitters, which can hit you at about 500 yards with this dispersal of heat. So we didn't see any of that. But I do think when Mars goes retrograde and goes back into square with Jupiter, there's probably pretty a chance we'll see something. And that's going to be October, and, you know, leading through October, the middle part of October. I think we're looking at October 13th with Heather. That was really sort of the big moment where Mars was just at all these really hard angles. And Mars will be the closest to the planet during that time on October 13th. So Mars is still the story. It is still the story. We've got the moon in Taurus tonight. So tomorrow when you wake up, and theoretically if you go to work, you're going to have the moon conjuncting Uranus which will be pretty kooky. But we got a nice grand trine at the very least with the moon, Uranus, sun, Jupiter. Hey, that's kind of innovative. That's kind of innovative. That's, you can do things during with that energy that can be fairly innovative. Yeah. So how would that look? It would be, what are your emotional expectations now? What are your emotional expectations? Where are you with your resources? Where are you with your hard assets? I think if you are in the crypto market, the crypto world, you may want to really listen to your hunches here with this moon conjunct Uranus. Look, a lot of people, Misaki and I talked about this on Friday. A lot of people on the XRP magic carpet ride. I'm not a huge XRP fan, not because I don't think it would be cool to have, a crypto that would compete with the dollar. It might be gold back. I don't know. I don't like the people that are the architects of XRP. They come out of the world banking community. Do we need more world bankers running XRP and this currency for the new reset? I don't think so. But I don't know if you can ride XRP for what another. I don't. For a long time it was around 30, 50, 30, 50, maybe around 80 cents a token. I think it's up past $3 now. If you got in at 80 and you wanted to move that and move it into another crypto, you probably could have done that. The challenge with that stuff is what you do when you get it out. And there are people that are far more experienced at the crypto world than I am. And exchanges, I think probably what you'd want to do is you probably want to move it into Bitcoin and then look at what you could buy, because there were a lot of people that actually will sell you a service or a product. They've got a Bitcoin exchange on their website, and they'll do that. And that would be kind of a worthwhile thing. If you made a nice little killing in XRP, you move it into Bitcoin, and you go out and get something. You can go to a website and buy something or buy a service. That stuff is possible, and you get to stay out of the exchanges a little bit. When I say exchange, going from your digital currency and turning it into paper currency, which is, I think the IRS is really, really looking and ready to snipe. And again, there are people that are more tactical at that stuff than I am, but that's rudimentary how you do it. I think you might be able to get a quick little run here if you follow your hunches with this moon and conjunction with Uranus and the trine with the sun and this trine with Jupiter and Pluto. Pluto's resources. Pluto is resources. If you're looking to buy some land, which a lot of people are, even though the moon is in its descendancy, it is waning. I think you could probably still find some interesting deals over the next 24 hours if you're looking for that kind of thing, and something you could maybe even invest in, slightly long term. Although the rental market is brutal right now, so if you're looking to buy, it's a buy to own. Certainly not buy to rent. That would not be, I think, a wise thing at this point. No. What else do we have? Let's see. We're coming up on a Sun-Neptune opposition, which is always interesting. So that's going to be, 5 days from now? That'll be on the 19th. What if it 5 days from now is the 11th? Oh, how about that? 9/11. 9/11, we come right into that Sun-Neptune opposition. That's going to be interesting. And that's a day after Mars goes retrograde. Wow. I wonder what's going to happen with 9/11 this year, because Mars gets right up there, and then it goes backwards, right? It's like, okay, it gets right up to the anniversary of 9/11. It's like, I wonder, like 9/11 now, for some people, 9/11 now has become like the JFK assassination. Right? When I was 3 years old when JFK was assassinated. But for some people, that's 9/11 for them. Like if you were born in 2004, So, you'd be 16 years old now. That would be like you slightly remember that. Slightly. Right? That'd be after the fact. Let's see, it'd be if you were born in 1997, you'd be like 4 years old. 1997. Even if you were 6 or 7 during that time, it's still a very early memory. So for a lot of people, it's become their version of JFK. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And I remember, who was it? It was Thomas Sheridan. Thomas Sheridan was saying, look, we got to forget 9/11 now. We've got to move on. It doesn't matter anymore. It's irrelevant. That's a really, and at the time, I took, I didn't think that was true. I took issue with that. Now, maybe not so much, because we're living through a new 9/11 now, right? We are in the new 9/11, and it started on 3/11. That's it. This is where we are now. And it's happening frame by frame, day by day, moment by moment, slow motion. So maybe there is some validity there, because we're living in 9/11 all over again. It just has a different script, different players, and a much more global application. So what can we get out of this week? Well, I would say do your best to have a kind of an emotional reset tomorrow, if you can, with the moon conjunct Uranus, right? Think about, because here's what's going on now. The way that the world is being scripted is that there are like these presets. They're presets. Okay, here's another day where Antifa and BLM are going nuts. And they're basically going through a small city like Rochester, and they're overturning tables, they're burning things down. What's the preset for that? You get pissed off, or you get frustrated, or who knows, maybe you're on the other side and you're just like, oh man, this is great. It's still a preset. But let's say you're not that person. Let's say you actually have some empathy towards somebody who lost a business and did nothing to actually lose that business, right? You bring up some feelings, some real feelings. So there's a preset for that. Then there's the preset for, COVID/Corona. And I have to say, when I walk around, and it's free, by the way, I get locked into these presets of feelings, right? I mean, it's like, okay, how do I feel about this? And I've played with a number of different scenarios and way to feel. And that's always been evolving, by the way. So on Friday, I'm having this thing with the post office now. And it is really bizarre. It is really bizarre. I sent out certified letter on the 18th of August to California. It is still not arrived. It is still not arrived. And when I go to the post office now, it's kind of weird. Like the dialogue is kind of weird. And the first time was like they had to track it down. It's like, oh, well, it went to San Jose. Oh, it went to San Mateo. Oh, it went to Sacramento. And it's been in Sacramento for a week. And the last time I was there, this person said, well, why don't you come back in 2 or 3 days? And if it's still there, if it hasn't arrived, then we'll call and we'll actually have a conversation with the person the supervisor there. So I went back and I did that. And I waited a long time. I waited in the lobby of the post office for about 45 minutes. So I didn't bring my cell phone. And when I go out, I don't often bring my cell phone for obvious reasons. So I'm sitting there. I have nothing else better to do since I don't have a cell phone and I can't neurotically cruise the internet. So I'm sitting there and I'm watching people come in. I was one of 2 people during that 45-minute stretch that did not wear a mask. It was very interesting. And the people who do wear the masks, they won't even look at you. They won't even look at you. If they do look at you, there's a furtive sort of, glance. Every now and then, I would get the stink eye from some old guy. I will get the stink eye from an old guy. And the women don't bother me. They don't hassle me. But every now and then, some old dude who might have been, hard in his day will give me the stink eye. I'm like, really? You're doing that? Come on, man. You don't want to do. I mean, look, I'm no spring chicken, but even at my advanced age, I could probably, take care of you, and it would not be fair. Just don't do that. So why are these guys doing that? Why do I get the stink eye from the old guy? I don't know. I don't know. It's weird. Anyway, but that's it. That's it. The occasional stink eye from the old guy, and that's it. They will not look at you. Not look at you. Not look at you. It is weird. And at some point, and I've thought about this, what would cause people now to take their masks off? I don't know. Because the numbers are out there, the CDC numbers, I mean, it's all out there, and nobody will take their mask off. They will not take their mask off. I think it would probably be akin to Tony Fauci and Birx coming out saying, it's over. It's over. You don't have to wear the masks. We figured this out. It's over. You don't have to wear the masks. And even if they said that, I guarantee you there'd be some people that'd be still wearing the mask. And I think this Neptune-Sun opposition has something to do with that in some ways. Not that the Sun has been in opposition with Neptune. It hasn't. It's just moving into Ord. But there's that obfuscation, right? It's that obfuscation. It's being able to hide behind something. It's being able to hide out. And I think that there are people who genuinely feel unsafe, and it has nothing to do with the virus. Nothing to do with the virus. I think it's an amalgam. It's an amalgam of the virus and the social disruption and the chaos and the fear of the future. I think they genuinely feel unsafe, and the mask gives them an opportunity to be or feel safer, more anonymity. That's what I think. And I think that there is this psychological branding that's taking place now. And if and when, because I don't know if there's going to be an if. The when is debatable. The masks come off. You're going to see people that won't take their masks off. They will keep them on. They will keep them on. Why will they keep them on? Because they've been psychologically branded. Psychologically branded. And and I think the psychological branding is related to kind of a soft trauma. Hard trauma is when you get a brick to the head. That's a hard trauma. A soft trauma is the psychological branding that's taking place, and they'll just keep it on. Well, I'll just wear this to be safe for a while. You'll see that if we ever come to that point, and I'm not sure we will. If we ever come to that point, it's like, okay, take the mask off. I think some people will, but there are people that won't take the mask off because they're going to want to be safe. So, well, I'll keep it off for a little while longer, just to make sure, just to be safe. Well, how long is that going to be? A month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months? Is that how long it's going to take? I saw a woman jogging down the street yesterday morning by herself with a mask on. It's like some random coronavirus particle going to find her like a CT fly and shoot up her nose or something. I mean, the thing is mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. So it's going to be interesting, though, when the sun begins to separate from Neptune, right? Because we're dealing with these two very interesting forces, the chaos of Pisces and the order of Virgo. And they are going to be in opposition. They're already there now. 5 days from now, they're exact. But as the sun moves away from Neptune, that's going to be interesting, because will people try to reassert some personal order in their lives? Will the Apollonian version of the sun in Virgo rise? We shall see. Not a lot of air. We got Mercury, and that's about it. That true node. So when we don't have a lot of air, guess what we don't have a lot of? We don't have a lot of perspective. And when that whole thing with prior to George Floyd, I was tracking this. I was just like, dude, we don't have any air right now. And I think we were at like March, April, May. There was just not a lot of astrological air. I think we had Saturn in Aquarius, and that was it, really. That was really it. That was like, hard air. So, and then it was like, well, we can't breathe. And we're kind of there again, although we do have Mercury and Libra, which is pretty good. And it's we got a nice sextile with Mercury right here with Venus. And that's good. This is good for relating. This is good for counseling. This is good for connecting and reaching out. Libra tends to be very fair. Venus and Leo, very heartfelt, open. So this is a nice opening. Like on a Monday, we have this kind of nice opening with Mercury, Venus sextile. Pay somebody a compliment. Doesn't cost much. Let's see. And we don't have a lot of water. Not a lot of water. When you don't have a lot of water, guess what? You're missing some empathy without a lot of water. So right now it's a domination of earth and fire. That's kind of what we're seeing in California. Domination of earth and fire. Scorched earth policy. Okay. There we go. There's the chart of the moment and for the week ahead. Boom. And that took up, an hour and 20 minutes. Man, I lose track of time sometimes. I just get into stuff, man. I just keep going. What do we got? 208 people. Welcome to the show. Let's see. Plus fire from the air, toxic. Yeah, absolutely. Very much so. Yahoo's always pushing fear porn. Fear porn. You can write porn. Fear porn about the coronavirus. Yes, they are. Absolutely. The designer mask. Oh my God. The designer mask. I saw this one woman. I went to the hardware store last week. And so I pull in at the same time, just said the car. And I kind of want, because the hardware store is the one place where people don't have to wear masks in this town. Because it's sort of like unspoken that Kyle Biederman, who's a Texas state representative, legislator, lets you not wear a mask in there. Even with that, people will, go in and wear masks. Anyway, I wanted to see this woman. I just waited a second to see what she looked like, what she would wear. And she comes out, and she puts her mask on, and she has a fucking watermelon slice right here on her face, where the mask is. And I'm like, what the hell is that about? A watermelon slice. It's not real. It's obviously stitched on there or whatever. It's like somebody thought it'd be cool to put a watermelon slice on a mask. So it looks like a smile? I don't know. Or I could be eating a piece of watermelon, right? It was just weird. It's like that was her choice of, kind of fruity attire. Fruity attire. I want to make a mask like a whitey tighty with a flap in the front so you can drink and smoke. What if you had a mask that looked like an ass, with a crack down the center? And then on one side you had kiss and the other side you had this. I think that might be kind of effective. What do you think? Kiss this. Somebody should do that. That'd be interesting mask on some level. There you go. It's right up there with the designer burqa. They are not. Yeah, it's like they're kind of cousins, aren't they? They're ideological cousins. Let's see. Shall we get into the rest of the stuff tonight? Let's do it. So I wanted to, first of all right. Masaki and I are having these interesting so Masaki and I got this thing going on right now. Like he'll send me stuff, and then maybe I'll send him a little thing. So he was like, okay. He was telling me about what's going on in Hawaii, which is just fucking nuts. So he was telling me about the governor of Hawaii, and I'm like, okay, well, who is doing this? What kind of person would do this? What kind of governor guy would do this? What would his chart look like? Let me see if I can pull up his chart. So I decided to pull his chart up. I gotta find it. I got all these JPEGs on my desktop. I got that. Where is his chart? His last name is Ige, I-G-E, Ige. Let me see. I have to go back in and reconstruct it. I will. The guy's got one of the weirdest charts that I've seen. Now, Hawaii, you got to understand that Hawaii's getting to be like Melbourne West. It's getting very heavy in Hawaii. Very, very heavy. And it's got to go back in. Do the chart of the moment. Let's see. Where is he? Where is that man? Okay, I'm just going to do it all over again. I'm going to do this thing on the fly. Give me just one second. On the fly. Let's do this. I think I even remember his chart. At least his time of birth. I think it's January 15th, 1957. I might be in the old sunrise chart. It's around 7 a.m. because I don't know his time. And I even remember where he was born, which is Pearl City. Hawaii. Let me just make sure I got the double check this thing. Another one of these tyrannical governors. Let's see. His name is David Ige. I-G-E. David Ige. And he was born, yes, I got the date right. So Hawaii, let me show you, and the rest of the world, your not so benevolent dictator. Let's see, where is he? Let's head it up here. Here he is. Okay. Here is your not so benevolent dictator, Mr. David Ige. There he is. Here he is. He is serving as the 8th governor of Hawaii. Hawaii's only had 8 governors. Wow. How about that? So he was born in Pearl City. The 5th is 6 sons. That's a lot of competition right there. Of Okinawan descent. You know, you have to wonder on some level, right? Like, does this guy have a grudge against the United States? I've never thought about that. I have never actually really thought about that. Like, if your parents were involved in World War II and basically their place, Okinawa got overrun, by Americans. Maybe you lost some relatives in the deal. Like, would you not have a score to settle? I never really thought about that. Now I am. Okay. Let's see. Hold on. During World War II, Tokyo survived the 100th Battalion. Oh, so was he an American? I guess he might have been an American. Okay, who are of Okinawan. So his father was an American. I get. Okay, now I see that he wasn't of Okinawan descent. So he was fighting against kind of his own people. Well, that's got to be kind of fucked up too. All right, here we go. Suru Ige worked as a nurse and a dental hygienist. Tokyo Ige, he died in 2005. All right, so what is this guy all about? I went to Pearl City High School, as usual, community sports, Pearl City Little League for 8 years, blah, 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 blah. Oh, senior class president. Well, you know, he is elected student body vice president, senior class president. So he's a Capricorn. His campaign for student body president stressed diversity and an end to bullying. Are you kidding me? So this guy was born a SJW. Look at that. Ige also led his tennis team to a championship. He was honored as Scholar Athlete. So as a Capricorn, he is an achiever. He was accepted by MIT, but instead he decided to attend University of Hawaii. Okay. Phi Sigma Delta Sigma. Oh, of course, he's a treasurer and vice president. So he's very into becoming involved in the hierarchical order of things. Let's see. He went to GTE, Hawaiian Telecom. He took graduate courses at UH, earned a master's in business administration, MBA. Hawaii Business Magazine named him one of the university's top MBA students, blah, blah, blah. Okay, he was appointed at the Hawaii House of Representatives. So he's a Capricorn, and he is ambitious. He's ambitious. Okay. Let's see. He was responsible for establishing seed capital, venture capital programs, software development initiatives, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So apparently he went up against, in 2012, he's been governor for 8 years. He went up against U.S. Naval Airman crewman, Army Captain Small Business Mike Greco. He was the first challenger Ige faced in a general election in over a decade. So this guy has been, how long has he been mayor, governor? Well, okay. This guy has been governor, House of Representatives in office. How long has he been governor for? Let me see here. He was elected in 2018. 24 gubernatorial election, he won the Democratic primary. In the general election, Abercrombie. Okay, I'm just trying to get a sense as to how long he's been governor. All right, so let's see. What else we have here? 2012 Reelection Campaign. So, okay, so he got reelected in 2012. All right, let's go through there. Yeah, 2012, okay. Beat that guy, Mike Greco. 2014. Let's see. After Abercrombie upset the supporters of late U.S. Senator Daniel Inouye by ignoring his wish to be replaced by Colleen Hanabusa, though outspent in the race, Ige defeated Abercrombie 66% to 31%. Okay. So this Ige is, so he was sworn in as the 8th governor in 2014. All right, there we go, 2014. So I guess he's been governor, what, 6 years now? 6 years? Oh, here we go. This is electoral history. All right. So he was in the Hawaii State Senate, 92, 94, 98, Hawaii State Senate, 17th District, 2002, unopposed there. That was easy. Set him up and knock him down. Unopposed there. Set him up and knock him down. Unopposed there. This guy's had it easy. So 2012, he runs for state senate. He beats this Greco guy. And then here he is in the gubernatorial 2014. So he's been governor since 2014. All right, let's take a look at him astrologically. Because this guy's kind of a cold-hearted bastard, actually. So I wanted to see what his chart was like. He's got a really weird chart. Right here. Let me throw my true node right there. All right. Let's check it out. Throw in some transits. So when I looked at his chart, I thought it was really odd. Really, really odd. Because the only thing he's really got going with his inner planets, and the inner planets really, let's just square it off from the sun to Mars, are nothing but oppositions and squares. So when you look at that with the inner planets are going to be how you're going to kind of act and operate on a personal level, right? When we move out here, Jupiter and Saturn are the bridge between the personal planets and the transpersonal planets. So these are theoretically the collective forces that act upon an individual, okay? These two planets are the mediators between the transpersonal and the interpersonal. With the interpersonal, the guy's got nothing but conflict. He's got the sun-moon opposition, so he's born in a full moon, right? Not quite, but super close. Close enough. We'll call it full. And full moon people tend to be pretty successful. I've noticed that. You know, sort of the astrological parlance is you get to shine, right? You get to shine with the full moon. It's your time to shine, your life to shine. So he's got that. And he has it in Cancer. But man, like, I think the guy's touchy. I think he's really touchy. He's got this T-square with the moon and Mars and the sun. And that, and cardinal signs, man, that is a touchy ass. He's like, this is not a guy you want to piss off. Not because he's powerful, but because I think he's spiteful. I think there is a highly vindictive streak with this man, and extremely sensitive with the moon. Very, very sensitive. And he's got the veneer of the Capricorn sun. Again, I've just cast this, a sunrise chart, but it wouldn't be surprised if it was a Capricorn rising. So he's got that Capricorn sun. He's got Venus in Capricorn. He's got Mercury in Capricorn. You know, but none of them are conjunct. Like, he's not getting any conjunction action here. None. Separate, 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 right? So when I see that in a chart, I'm looking at segmentation. Like, this is a guy that keeps his relationships separate, his thoughts separate, and his identity separate. This is not an easy person to get to know. Not an easy person to get to know. But I will tell you this, he does suffer from a lack of confidence with that Sun-Neptune square. He's got a lack of confidence. It's a, you know, kind of a wide square, but it is a square. And if you have somebody who has low self-esteem or lack of confidence, and they've got this hard-ass T-square with these cardinal planets and Mars and Aries, look out. Look out. This is somebody who could be very problematic. Very problematic. Because on an individual level, what's he dealing with? He's dealing with opposition and conflict. That's it. Right? that is it. Moon Mercury opposition. This is somebody who has a hard time figuring out how to deal with his emotions. You know, the moon being his emotional body, separated out from the moon, from Mercury. And when you get that kind of separation, and especially with over officious and like super kind of, you know, ambitious Capricorn, I mean, I think it's borderline kind of sociopathic, actually. You know, efficient, like in that, you know, we're going to do what's right or best for the company or the country or the state or whatever. That's Capricorn speaking. And the moon is like separated out of there, you know, and the only kind of way you get to the moon is through conflict. This guy's got a temper. I'm telling you right now, this dude has a temper. With that Mars moon square, temper. And what do we have here? Well, we've seen him really engage with his Mars, right? Everything's been like, you know, heating up in Hawaii. And they're putting up barricades around the government offices there in Hawaii. Now, Mars is going to go retrograde. That's going to be interesting. And, you know, I don't know what sort of opposition there is in Hawaii. And you're stranded there on an island, too. Like, if I was living in Hawaii, I'd be very concerned. I'd be very concerned. This is a guy that could close the borders. This is a guy that says, you're not getting out of Hawaii. It's already hard to get in. You got to spend 2 weeks of quarantine there. I think it might be easier to get in to get out at some point. He's got Pluto on his sun, right? So, again, is that a power trip? I'd say it's a power trip. Now, is he, you know, can he transform himself and rise to the occasion and, you know, find his humanity with his Cancerian moon? I don't know. It's going to be, we'll find out, I guess. Or maybe we won't. You know, this guy, again, this is all separate here. It's all very segmented. Relationships, how he thinks, how he communicates, and who he is are all in kind of a very wide enough so that they're not really classically conjunct. Although you could make a case that whenever planets are within the same sign, you could say that, well, you can make a case that they are conjunct, but they'd be very weak conjunctions nonetheless. I would say that based on the fact that it's Capricorn, that it's chilly, it's cold, efficient, Mercury retrograde. So somebody who might take things away. Possibly. Could he rethink things? Maybe. Is it possible? We'll see. He's going to have Saturn hit his Chiron, but that won't be for another 2 years, roughly. This is a weird chart. It is very weird. Then we get to Jupiter. Now we get to Jupiter, and we have the trine to the sun. Right there. Where's Jupiter? Right there. It's at 1. Oh, look at that. We have Mercury on his Jupiter today. Interesting. So, and I'm talking about him. So the trine to the sun, even though it's out of the element, lends itself to confidence. So it's odd because he has the Sun Neptune square, which I think brings up doubt. But then he has the Sun Jupiter trine, which can bring him a sense of confidence. And he probably alternates between the two. There are times where I think he feels like he's kind of unbeatable and powerful. And there are other times where it feels like he can be very, very vulnerable and might overreact with that Sun Neptune square. This guy's got to learn some empathy. He's got a fair amount of water in his chart. He needs to learn some empathy. He does have a sextile with Venus, right? So now we're having Venus interact with an outer planet. He's got more action with some of the outer planets in his chart. He's got the Venus sextile to Neptune. That is, sextiles are openings. So he has to learn about empathy and compassion in this lifetime. There's an opening to that end. But I don't know. I think this guy is challenged. Oh, can't see chart. Oh, my bad. All right. Well, let me do this. I'm talking to myself, apparently. Here, I'll show you. I'll go over exactly what I said. Here we go. Give me 1 second. And I'll show you his chart. I thought I had it up there. My bad. My bad. I'll show you. I think this is it right here. Let me see. Nope, that's the Antifa chart, which I'll be going over. A little early on that one. Give me 1 second. Where is it? I got all these freaking charts up. Chart of the moment. What's this? Right here. That's it. I think this is it right here. Give me a second. No. Moment. There he is. Okay, you can see it now. All right. Let me just go over this again. There's the sun at 25 Capricorn, Mercury 14 retrograde, Venus. You see how they're all in that super wide conjunction right there? They're not even conjunct. They're just separated out. You can see again. I apologize. But there's nothing happening, right? There's nothing happening with these inner planets. There is, but it's all based on opposition and conflict, and mostly with Mars. This is a guy, like I said, he's got a bad temper. He's got a very, very bad temper. And his true node is at 27 Scorpio. So, the true node in Scorpio is about things like magnetism, the power of attention, the acquisition of resources through other people, occult powers, magic. So it's an interesting true node. Again, it's at that 27th degree, so it's kind of not easy to manage. So again, this is it's an on chart, and we don't get any real action again until we see that Sun trine to Jupiter, which was just talking about. Sun Jupiter trine right there. There's that Sun square to Neptune, alternating between extreme confidence and extreme doubt. Extreme confidence and extreme doubt. It's changed now. Right. Extreme confidence, extreme doubt. It seems like I've got wrong chart up again. Let's try this one more time. You'll know his chart inside and out before it's all said and done. Let me do this. I want to pop it. It'll be easy for me to pop. There it is, right there. Right there. So let me just do this. I'm just going to pull it off the screen. There it is, right there. All right, one more time. You'll know better than I do at this point. Here we go. There it is. Once more with feeling. See it? Okay. Sun, Mercury, Venus. Separate, space. We have Sun squared Neptune, Sun trine Jupiter. Right there, overconfident, self-doubt, overconfident, self-doubt. Sun square Mars, anger, Moon square Mars, anger. Emotions separated out. Full moon, right? Full moon, which is generally considered, again, kind of a luminary. A lot of people with full moons they're noticed. And if he can convince people that he's got his shit together with all this Capricorn, his full moon will be noticed. And it may look like on the surface that he may care, but that may not truly be the case. This is a man with a grudge. Don't piss him off. Don't piss him off. He has an opening to learn empathy in this lifetime. Right there with the Venus Neptune sextile. And again, we don't really get any real action until the Sun trines Jupiter, right? Right there. Then we get out here with Saturn. And again, we really don't have a lot going on with Saturn except for this biquintile with the moon. And I think that has a lot to do with endurance with that Saturn moon biquintile. And also in some respects, I think probably being able to understand kind of emotions at a mass level. And then we finally get into this Saturn, or is it with Uranus? The Saturn-Uranus trine. To me, that's the technology stuff for him. Right? That's all the telecom stuff. Saturn, he made that a profession. And he did quite well at it. Anyway, I'm not going to bore you with this chart that much longer, but this is not a guy who I think is somebody that, I think this guy can be vindictive. I think he can be very vindictive, and he's not easy to reach. He can be very officious, extremely, extremely officious. There you go. Governor David Ige, thank you for your patience as I sorted out those charts. Okay, so I wanted to talk about Antifa tonight. And I wanted to talk about sort of the roots of Antifa. And it all starts with a particular person. And I'm going to show you his chart. And I have some thoughts about Antifa, and not just the organization or whatever it is, if it's a non-organization, but more along the lines of an entity. Okay? Because I think that's what we're dealing with here is entities. And these are entities with psychic grudges. Now, I'm going to try to get into this a little bit. So here we go. This is, I'm going to show you, well, first of all, what I want to do is I want to show you the guy who is really kind of credited with being the sort of the titular head of Antifa. And we have to go all the way back, way, way, way back to World War I Germany, World War II Germany, and a fellow by the name of Ernst Thalmann. And I'm going to show you some pictures of Ernst Thalmann so you can get a visual of him. And then we're going to jump into his Wikipedia page, and then I'm going to show you his chart. So this is generally regarded as kind of the spiritual godfather of Antifa. This guy right here. And to understand Antifa, you have to understand the roots of Antifa and where it all comes from and how this thing sort of kicks off. And he's a good place, or he's a good person to take a deep dive into. He's got some crazy fucking eyes, doesn't he? Look at those eyes. So he is a member of a group called the KPD, which KK stands for Communist, right? So he is one of the key figures of the Communist Party in Germany. And the Communist Party of Germany are Stalinists. They are hardcore Stalinists. And Leninists and Stalinists. And the KPD, the SPD, they are social democrats, right? And they are Marxists, and they're related, but they're different. They are groups that are different, and they are allies to some degree. They're allies. So he becomes a very prominent member of the Kommunistische Partei Deutschlands, or the KPD. And he really takes a main role in the German Revolution in Hamburg. That starts on the 29th of October 1918. And this is the guy that actually winds up running for chancellor. He starts off like incredibly humble means, but he winds up actually running for chancellor of Germany against Adolf Hitler at some point, okay? So here we have these two groups. One is the KPD and the other is the SPD. Well, look, he's even got a statue. Look at that in Weimar. So during World War I in the Weimar Republic, the KPD competed for leadership of the working class. So this is after Germany's been wiped out. Like, they've been wiped out. The Treaty of Versailles has leveled incredible sanctions against the German people, bankrupted them financially and morally. And in that vacuum, you have these competing groups. You have the KPD, you have the SPD, and then eventually you have the Nazi Party. So originally, it is the KPD and the SPD who are going at it. Like, they want to control, and they have different ideas about how things should be run. And the SPD is kind of a softer version of more socialist. These guys are hardcore communists, super hardcore communists, right? So here we go. Thalmann's KPD thus fought the SPD as the main political enemy, acting according to Comintern policy, which declared the Social Democrats to be social fascists. So this is quite interesting because we're talking about mindsets now. And I'm going to bring this forward because what we're seeing here are the formation of these sort of two groups. And we can see on some level that the social fascists that the KPD is accusing the SPD of could be translated into the Democratic Party. Like, the Democratic Party might be a bit too bourgeois in some ways for like Antifa, or or the hardcore, really hardcore communist anarchos. So this is where we're having this split now, and the KPD becomes the enemies of the SPD. This made it difficult for the two leftist parties to work together against the emergence of Adolf Hitler. So what do we have? Divide and conquer in some ways, although I don't really think they were socially engineering this. I think that it was the power structures in Moscow who were really trying to get his hooks in to the German people. And Ernst Thalmann was going to Moscow to meet with Stalin. Like, he went to Stalin. He hung out with Stalin. So this guy is a pretty significant player. So this is where now the KPD eventually labels the SPD and the Nazis fascists, right? So everybody else is fascist but the KPD. This is what happens. And he's the guy that founds a particular group. And the group that he founds for about 3 years is sort of the first working version of Antifa, right? So this is called the Roter Frontkampfbund, right? The RFB. And this is a paramilitary group. It's a paramilitary organization. So it's this group that begins to carry out violent actions. And I have the chart for this as well, July 1924. We're going to look at that. So this is sort of the first incarnation of Antifa. Now, there are and will be groups who will begin to form post-World War II in England to take on, the so-called rise of fascism, because, after World War II, people were terrified that fascism would gain a stronghold. And they saw that the only group that could stand up to fascism were the communists. So if they didn't want fascism to rear its ugly head, they aligned with communists. This is where we get the spy ring, Kim Philby, and all those people, right? So this is the first kind of incarnation. And it's this Thalmann character. So it's interesting that the first meeting was held in February. February is a revolutionary month. I'll bet, dollars to dimes that it was held during an Aquarian phase. Dollars to dimes. Okay, here we go. Or dimes, dollars, we're going to do it. The Front, right? The Red Front was the newspaper of the RFB. And we see, this fist, this fist of power, right? The fist of power. We see this as a symbol to this very day, right? And this group lasts about 3 years. And Thalmann would eventually be imprisoned, and he winds up being actually shot by Hitler. And he's kind of martyred after that point. So after the Nazi takeover in 1933, RFB members were among the first to be arrested and incarcerated in concentration camps. You bet your ass they were, right? The Nazis sought revenge on their former rivals, and many of the RFB died in the Nazi prisons. Of those who survived or avoided arrest, many followed the call of the Second Spanish Republic, the Spanish Civil War. They joined Centuria Thalmann in the international brigades to fight against nationalist rebels. During World War II, former Red Front fighters fought in the Soviet Red Army against Nazi Germany. So, a lot of the roots of terror in Europe in the 20th century really start here, because you also have the Baader Meinhof gang, the German Red Brigade. This is all kind of starting here during this period. So this is where this whole thing starts. Okay. So these are the key dates: April 1925, June 1925, and then February 1926. These are sort of the numbers. Now, what I did is I decided to look at the chart of this Ernst Thalmann. Like, who is the spiritual sort of godfather of this group, which really becomes kind of the model group for Antifa, modern day Antifa. And I'll show you the chart of modern day Antifa as well, or about as close to it as I can get, by the way. So let's look at this guy's chart. And again, I'm just using a sunrise chart here at this point. So he's an Aries. You want a guy who's going to start a revolutionary party? There's your sign right there. Mercury retrograde in Aries. Maybe that's in response to being like an anti-fascist. So this is the first thing that really kind of jumped out at me with his chart. But he also has some interesting aspects here with Uranus and Libra. And I think that this is one of those collective energies with Uranus and Libra, which is radical fairness, right? So he's born during a time where he would, as an individual, try to express radical fairness. And of course, these Uranus cycles last 7 years. So this would essentially go up to roughly about 1892. So anybody born during this time would have been engaged in that kind of Uranian putsch. And with the Jupiter conjunction here, again, what does Jupiter do? Brings more of something. So it's an expansion around these kind of Uranian and radical ideas. I mean, we can kind of see here with Uranus and Libra, sort of this transpersonal implementation of social justice. And, some very interesting relationships with Uranus and the outer planets. We have the trine to Pluto here in Gemini. Again, this is going to be with Gemini, what did we have, right? Again, generationally, a lot of these people are going to be kind of in the mix at the same time. So, and Pluto is involved in roughly about a 17-year cycle. So he's right at the beginning of that cycle. And what do we have with Pluto and Gemini? We've got, two groups, right? We have two competing groups. We have basically the Stalinist versus the Marxist, and who is trying to vie for power in the moral and economic void of the Weimar Republic. I mean, and that is a generational theme that is going to get played out over the next 17 years. So this is quite interesting in a lot of ways, just from a transpersonal perspective. And he's got Mars, which is in Virgo, and you would think, well, Mars and Virgo, well, that's all about details, but he's also got that Mars-Pluto square, which is quite intense. Now, that's going to happen on a personal level, right? And Mars-Pluto squares are powerful. They're very, very powerful. And we're dealing with mutable signs here. Mutable signs. So, I mean, this could be somebody who would use Mars in a way to, with this aspect, to upset social structures and social orders. I could see that, especially with these early degrees. And this is exactly, why? Because, Mars is theoretically the ruler of his chart, theoretically, with Sun, Mercury in Aries, right? So this is a very powerful aspect for this guy. And then we have the oppositions here with Mars, right? We have a Mars-Venus opposition too. That's very difficult. Venus in Pisces kind of wants peace, right? Venus in Pisces wants peace, and it has these ideals. It has these ideals that would be very, I wouldn't necessarily say fair, but ideal. Venus in Pisces has ideals that would be ideal. Like supernatural or ecclesiastical fairness. Divine fairness. But with the South Node conjunct his Venus, he can't trust that. He can't trust that. It's a lesson that he should be learning, actually, right? He should be, in this lifetime, he should be organized, he should be Virgoan, but he cannot kind of let go of this. He has to figure this thing out. He has to learn about compassion and forgiveness and things that go along with this kind of Piscean idea, but he can't. He's got this big fat T-square here, right? With Pluto. Venus square Pluto, Mars square Pluto, Mars, Venus opposition. This is really hard. This is a very difficult aspect. And I think one that lends itself to both violence and obsession. Like he could be obsessed with an ideal, and this ideal, this fairness, right? His parents got busted when he was a kid. They were shopkeepers, and they got busted for taking on stolen goods. And I think it marked him. He got sent off to another home to be raised for a while. And I don't know what happened to him, but I think it marked him. Remember, what did I put for this time? 7 a.m. Sunrise chart. But because he's born so far north, you get these wonky northern hemisphere charts. Like the houses get real distorted. Like if you ever do a reading for somebody who's born this far north, I actually probably would suggest you use whole signs, equal houses, because it's almost impossible to interpret a 12th house that's got 3 different signs in it. But sometimes it can be appropriate. In this case, it's just a marker because I'm using the sunrise chart. Saturn in Cancer, which is hard. Saturn in Cancer is hard. It's it can be tough childhoods. People who have Saturn in Cancer can have tough childhoods. And he's got the square to Uranus, which is, again, rebellious, right? Structure, order, Uranus, radical, Libra. This guy, basically is the chart of a fucking revolutionary. And he's got this strong Aries here as well. Very strong Aries. And it's interesting because he's dealing with this Gemini, not the ascendant, but Chiron, and this split between these two parties. One being the social Marxists, social Democrats, and the other being the communists. Now, here's what I think. Okay, here's what I think. All right, and I just wanted to show you that chart. I'm going to show you the chart of this group. Let me show you the chart of the group that he formed. This paramilitary group that basically went out and started kicking ass, right? Which is sort of the model, the blueprint for what we're seeing now. And I tried to get as much of this chart in here as possible. And it's kind of interesting. You'll see why. Screen share. Right there. Okay, so this is the group that he forms. Right there, the Roter Frontkampfbund. Okay. And they just say July of 1924. So, I was trying to, kind of look at what was going on in July of 1924. And so I started off early in July, like July 1st, and I went up to like July 22nd. And Mars, was in retrograde or station for most of that month. And what's interesting about this Mars, because remember now, this is when he forms this group. He's got Venus at 3 degrees Pisces. So this Mars, even at the 15th of July, and whether it was the 1st of July or the 22nd of July, even the 30th of July, it's still going to be conjunct his natal Venus. So that's conflict. And remember, that Venus is opposite his natal Mars. So he formed this group during a Mars-Mars opposition in his life. And when we look back and see what happened during that period where we had this kind of run-up with George Floyd, BLM, Antifa, where was Mars? It was in Pisces. It was in Pisces, and it was about victimization, martyrdom. And we see that right here. South Node is in Aquarius during that time. And Leo is in the North Node position. And it's conjunct Neptune, right? So what's really interesting is that they're using this Leo energy with this kind of fanatical Neptunian sort of vibe, right? This is what's happening. In this case, I think Neptune is a little fanatical, right? That's what I think. And we have Jupiter here in Sagittarius, usually pretty well placed. Jupiter in Sagittarius, good placement, but it's in trine with Neptune. So they're using a lot of ideological energy at this time. They're just pumping it, channeling it into that ideal. Neptune is idealized. And in Leo, it's all about passion, right? It's about passion and who's going to come out on top. Because this is about winning. This is not about sharing, right? If it was about sharing, it would be the true node in Aquarius, and maybe the social Marxists and the communists could get along and bond together, and they could defeat the fascists. But somebody's got to win, right? So this is what he does right here. And we do have this Mars square, and it's squaring what? Jupiter. Right? So again, when we see these Jupiter squares to a planet, what happens? It makes things bigger, but not always in a better kind of way. Like, this is interesting. Like, this trine to Jupiter is interesting. Like, there's a lot of ideological fervor going on here, but the square to Mars is not, to me, it's like, this is not going to work. It's not going to last, because it's all built and based on, in a lot of ways, his own chart. And I could even probably put that up. And if I did with Synastry, you would see his Venus right there. And that Mars is like right on his south node. So to me, this is like picking up from some past life thing. He's trying to, right the wrongs of some other incarnation. And this is the moment he does it. It doesn't really matter, right? The moon would make it maybe a little more relevant. I'm really not really looking at the moon. I'm really looking at where Mars is, some of these outer planets are. I'm not even really talking about Mercury, the sun to a lesser degree. It's here. I'm looking at here and here and here and here, because those are going to be constants. Saturn is going to be a constant as well, because Saturn is in Libra. And what are they trying to fight for? Justice, balance, equality. But during this month, right, the sun, give or take a week, 10 days, going to be in square with Saturn. So this is kind of the roots. Now, here's where I wanted you to really pay attention, because look where Chiron is during this time. It's in Aries. It's in Aries. And if we back this thing off by about 3 years, 1921, 1920, it's a violent time in Germany, very violent time, and we begin to see the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Third Reich with Chiron in Aries. Now, in 1968, when we had Chiron in Aries, what do we have? We had violence, riots, the Weather Underground. And who comes out of that? It's Richard Nixon. And Nixon is an interesting character. He's an interesting president and a controversial president. He winds up being this law and order president until he winds up ultimately being impeached. I've talked about Nixon a lot and how he really becomes sort of the American youth murdering their father. That's what Nixon is. He's a Capricorn. And that's what he becomes. You have all these kind of, bloodthirsty young men and women in America who wanted nothing more on a psychological level than to murder their father. And that's what Nixon is. He's their father. He was hated. Nixon was hated by young people. So in some ways like Trump, but different. And that's when Chiron was in Aries. And in 1968, Nixon took advantage of those riots. He became sort of this law and order president. You know what Nixon did? He kicked fucking ass. He kicked their ass. Nixon basically defeated the Weather Underground. How did he do it? Well, he set the FBI after them. And they hounded the Weather Underground. Hounded them. The FBI was actually on Nixon's side during that time. And eventually the Weather Underground were running out of money. They were having kids. And they wound up turning themselves in because they were being hassled all the time. They were being followed. Their apartments, the contents of their apartments were being overturned. They became super paranoid. They couldn't trust anybody. So they came in from the cold. And a lot of that had to do with Nixon. But here we go. There's Chiron in Aries. And I'm pretty sure that the United States Chiron is at 20 degrees Aries. First real incarnation of Antifa is this group. And really what it is this guy, Ernst Thalmann, working something out in a big way with Mars conjuncting his Venus, conjuncting his south node, Mars opposition. Boom. Now, here's what I got out of this stuff. When I started to get into this, okay, so Craig Simpson and I, we talked about this when he was on my show, or I was on actually his show, probably 2 months ago. We talked about egregores and we talked about golems. And egregores are collective energies. They're like these spiritual, dark spiritual forces sort of descend upon a people, you know. And I think what we're dealing with really with Antifa is this egregoric energy. And it really starts, well, I don't know if it starts then, but it really sort of takes root in Germany during that time. And what you have is a lot of people who wind up getting murdered, maimed, imprisoned. There's a lot of real kind of psychic whiplash and psychic plasma that gets, you know, just sort of thrown into the ethers at that time. And I feel like there are these disembodied forces that are like floating around the planet, and they're trying to settle scores. That's what it feels like. They're trying to settle scores. And it's always this kind of battle between nationalism and socialism, or nationalism and communism. Because when Hitler emerges out of this kind of, you know, really piercing the center of this divide between these two groups, that's when this idea of German nationalism really comes to the surface. And none of this ever seems really reconciled on any level. And no matter what theoretically happened at the end of World War II, the Nuremberg trials and all that stuff, none of it seems very reconciled. Because after that, again, you have a lot of these young Brits who become communist spies, like Kim Philby, and it never gets really reconciled. And then, of course, on the other side of the wall, the Berlin Wall, which was really a mask in a lot of ways, like a big face mask for the East. There's this idea now that they want to continue to come into the West and infiltrate the West, and, you know, do what they did to Central Europe and some of Western Europe. And of course they did that, and they came into the United States. And again, from an ideological perspective, that stuff was active. But I'm talking about from like this collective and spiritual energy, this egregoric energy, has not been resolved. And so this is what I think is trying to get worked out in some ways. So it's like it descends upon these groups, almost like a, you know, almost like John Carpenter's The Fog or something like that. So I have another chart here, and this is kind of like the latest incarnation of Antifa, and it really comes out in Sweden. And we see the rise of the National Front, right? So and a lot of these groups, by the way, are controlled opposition. And the National Front is this response to a lot of different things. The National Front becomes very popular in England. And this is where you have like the whole skinhead movement. And it's a response to the fact that England had been absolutely and utterly bankrupted because of the amount of money that they had to take out and fight World War II. So the economy in England for a very long time is shit. And they kind of moved towards more of a kind of a soft socialist sort of government, not full-on communist like Kim Philby would love to have, but you have national health and things like that. And it's a really brutal time during the 1970s, lots of strikes. And we have sort of this rise of the punk movement and the National Front movement. And at the same time, there begins to be this sort of infusion of refugees that are starting to come into England. And the National Front is not really crazy about that, because they see these groups as being a threat to not only their so-called heritage, but their jobs and the economy. And of course, they have, you know, people that will rile them up. And a lot of these groups sometimes are controlled opposition. So this is starting to happen in Europe. And they're talking about the rise of fascism in Europe. And of course, people are freaked out by, you know, this specter of Adolf Hitler. And really what it is, in a lot of ways, it's a rudimentary response or reaction to this kind of globalistic sort of surge that's beginning to take place in the 1970s and later in the 1980s. You can see this in places like France, where they have this ongoing kind of conflict and war with Algeria, and then what happens? You got a bunch of Algerian refugees that come into France. The Turks come into Germany. We have this whole group of first wave immigrants that come into post-war Europe, and it's sort of like this is what the UN is beginning to do, to repopulate parts of Europe, because places are getting bombed out. They've got to have some place to go. It's a technique and a strategy that's been used again and again and again and again. And so Europe has seen this again and again and again. So this last wave of sort of refugee and immigrants from sub-Saharan Africa is not the first wave. It's been going on for a while. And these groups have risen up as a reactionary force against what's happening. And it might be ethnocentric, it might be tribal, but ultimately they saw these people as a threat to their economies, which in many cases were quite fragile and not very good. So you have the rise of the National Front. You have people who would be populist and use this kind of angst and this energy to further their own political gains and aspirations. Now remember, in many cases, it can be very much controlled opposition. So now this is starting to rise again in Europe in the beginning of the 90s. And it started in 1990 in Sweden. And it was always on November 30th, they would have these marches in Sweden. And the marches were, again, this kind of rise of nationalism in Sweden, which was sort of happening in Europe during that time. David Bowie did that song, Fashion, Turn to Love, Fashion. It's kind of about that. It's kind of about this period where Europe is freaked out. They're seeing these wave of immigrants, and they're like, fuck it, man. We got to hold on to our territory, because we're going to lose our women. We're going to lose our gene pool. We're going to lose our jobs. So now, as a result of that, you have these, reactionary, anti-reactionary groups, I suppose, which really is Antifa. And Antifa comes onto the scene in one of these marches on the 30th of November in 1993. This is where Antifa really begins to show up. And so I did a chart for this on November 30th. And what's interesting about this chart are a couple of different things. Number one, we have Saturn in Aquarius. And if we dial it back and go back to 1990, that's when Saturn went into Aquarius during that period, right? It was just going into Aquarius right around 1990, end of 1990. So here it is, right? And this is when they're starting to have this theoretical rise of fascism in Europe. And by the time we get to 24 Saturn Aquarius, we have this next incarnation of Antifa. And they would show up from time to time, but this is really where it starts to happen again, right here. So we have Mars in Sagittarius, which again is very strident, very strident. And Sagittarius is one of those signs where, when it is engaged in knowing about something or engaged in what they think they know, right? It is a sign that can be very, very zealous. So here we have this zealotry kind of baked in. And there's nothing wrong with a strong Mars in Sagittarius, right? If you've got a cause, if you've got something that you really want to further, Mars in Sagittarius is a good placement for it. We have the Sun in Sagittarius and the true node also in Sagittarius. So very strong Sagittarius with this version, this incarnation of Antifa. But we also have the square with Saturn, right? Square with Pluto, square with Mercury, and square with Venus. These are hard squares, fixed signs, right? Fixed signs. So this is built. This latest incarnation is built on this Saturn square. And when we get into Scorpio, and that's a lot of Scorpio. And Scorpio is very obsessive, right? Scorpio will see things through to the end. And I feel like with this square, it's like by any means necessary, we are going to achieve kind of social solidarity by any means necessary. That's those squares. And it's really Mercury, Pluto, Venus. Those are the squares right there. Jupiter makes it all bigger. And Sagittarius is just absolutely convinced that this is the right thing. This is the right thing. And what's happening here is that the Sun and Mars are squaring Chiron in Virgo. And that has to do with things like, I wonder if this is why Antifa are vegans with that Chiron and Virgo. I wonder if that's it. But Virgo's a little neurotic. And Chiron and Virgo is a little neurotic. And it's squaring off against, and again, there's this sense of perfection with Virgo. Like there's no leeway, right? There's no leeway. There's no common ground here with this square. No common ground. It's a very interesting chart. Very, very interesting chart. And we have the moon in Gemini. And guess what? Where's the true node right now? It's in Gemini. And it's at, 27 degrees right here. What'll be interesting is when we get to about a year from now, and these nodes have come into balance in some ways. And I'm wondering if we'll be able to complete this cycle, right? Because it feels like, again, even there in Europe, and I know that there's political reasons why, political, economic reasons, and there's also, there's also this kind of false opposition, right? And there's also people that are trying to, like Le Pen, and Le Pen, who's a populist, trying to, basically rally the French people and say, let's hold on to our Frenchness. Let's be Francophiles. Let's not let these other groups come into our country because we have to hold on to these things. They're our heritage. They're also our jobs. And so, whatever. But he is in some ways emblematic of that. Now, Margaret Thatcher gets lumped into this whole thing with the National Front because she was a conservative. I don't think that that's really true. I think Margaret Thatcher was a capitalist. I think she was a capitalist. I don't think she was the same as Le Pen. I don't think so. I think Margaret Thatcher would have been fine if England was orderly and was making money. That's my sense. She was no Marge Schott. But again, from this idea that there are these egregoric energies that settle down and are trying to get this thing worked out. And who knows how old these energies are. I'm just looking at what was happening in Germany with, those two parties. But who knows how long they've been around and how they manifest and how they incarnate and how they seep into our affairs and seep into our psyche. And they pop up as, the reincarnation of these various groups. And I really think that that's what we're looking at here. It reminds me of something like out of a Star Trek episode, like the original series where they'd be hanging around some planet and all of a sudden, this TV mist would descend upon them. And then they'd be like, crazy people or different people, right? It's kind of what it feels like. And, and right now, what do we have? We've been dealing with Saturn, Jupiter during this time. Here's Jupiter, right? Jupiter, if I did a transit for this, Jupiter would be right here, conjuncting Neptune and conjuncting Uranus from this very day, which would be what? It would be expanding sort of this radicalization. And this really is, historically, this day is when sort of this kind of counter-fascistic group, this anti-fascistic group emerges in Sweden on the 30th of November. So there we are, boys and girls, the various incarnations of Antifa, the roots of Antifa and Ernst Thalmann. And this is sort of what we're dealing with again now. you know. And unfortunately, people are. It's not like. And what's odd now is that I wouldn't really call the alt-right the National Front. You know, I wouldn't call them that at all. They're, you know, they're like, I don't know, mashed potatoes and gravy compared to the National Front. I mean, those guys are kind of hardcore, very hardcore. I don't know what it's in response to now, right? So it's kind of like it's descended upon our time, and there's like, but it. I mean, if you look back here, there were these two groups that were really in conflict, theoretically, right? Theoretically. You go back to Germany, and there were these two groups, and then there were three who were really in conflict. And again, it has to do with these versions of Antifa. But now this thing has risen, and are they really in conflict with anybody? I mean, not really. I mean, who are they in conflict? Fucking Milo Yiannopoulos, Ann Coulter, Alex Jones? Really? Ben Shapiro? I mean, these people, they're weak sauce figureheads. There's really no conflict there. I mean, if there was, then it became imagined and it became fictionalized. And that's why I think that these energies they're these egregoric energies. They're these collective energies. It really feels like they're phantasms that are just hanging around with a lot of unfinished business. And I'll tell you that they've been around pre-Antifa. They've been around pre-Antifa, and here they are again. They've settled in, and there are these. How would I say this? It's almost like there are these occult midwives that bring the energy in. And they bring the energy in through our children and through our media. And there are certain groups that I believe are predisposed to bringing this energy in. And I'm not gonna get into, you know, nomenclature, right? But there are certain groups who are very good at it. And these groups practice rituals. And whether they are doing it directly or indirectly, they're doing it. And so they keep this egregoric energy alive. It's been around for a very long time. Very long time. And I think this is what we're dealing with. And I just showed you these two incarnations of these groups, or at least one of these groups. And it feels like in order for us to finally kind of get through this, right, that there has to be some kind of a clearing, a massive clearing, energetic clearing. And, you know, I don't know what that's going to take. The flipping of the energy of the sun, but this energy has got to be cleared from this domain, period, end of story. That whatever those forces are, they need to go to the place where they belong. Because they've been here for too long, caused too much disturbance, too much chaos. They got to go. They got to go. There is a place for that, where they can rest peacefully or continue their kind of turbulent, restless, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? Pilgrimage, I suppose, you know, until something changes. Until something changes with that. Maybe they can do it here. I don't know. But it's got to go. For us to be able to live on this planet peacefully, this has to be resolved. And like I said, it keeps reincarnating or descending again and again and again. And here we are. Is this the final countdown? Is this where it gets settled out? We're going to find out. We're going to find out. Okay, I wanted to talk about Mars, because one of the things that happens with Mars, right? One of the things that happens with Mars in these groups are strikes. Strikes. And I think what we're going to see with Mars retrograde are strikes. That's, I think, the next phase with this Mars retrograde. Now, we've already seen strikes in ways that are a bit different. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, when we have shortages with goods, whether it's ammo or whether it's meat or whether it's manufacturing products, you know what happens? They have people who are in these factories, and they will test positive for COVID-19. And guess what will happen? They'll shut the plant down. They will shut the plant down. Whether it's meat or bullets or freezers, they will shut the plant down. So these are, in some ways, engineered, tactical, COVID-based strikes. I think where we're headed next are actual strikes. I think we're going to see people walk out. And this is what LeBron James and some of the players in the NBA and the NFL were trying to do. They were trying to get people to walk out. I think that's coming. I think that might be where we're going with some of this Mars retrograde stuff. So be prepared. Be prepared. If people go on strike, and I mean real strikes, not this, somebody's got a couple of people have COVID and we're shutting the meat plant down. Real strikes. Be prepared. So what are we at now? We're at 9/6. You've got 4 days before Mars goes retrograde. Think about what you need that, you may not be able to get if somebody went on strike. Just saying. That's where I think this is headed. Mars retrograde. And, and they're good at it, right? They're very big with the union stuff. Very, very, very big. BLM is all about unions. They're all about unions. And guess what? Cops are unions. Could we see police go on strike? That's very possible. Don't rule that out. Don't rule police going on strike. That could happen because Mars is in Aries and we could see police go on strike. Wouldn't that be great? Yeah, not so much. Not so much. All right. Here we go. I always want to leave you something positive here. But I am going to tell you, you got to be living with your eyes wide open and your bright lights on. Okay, your bright lights on, your high beams on. Mars retrograde. You can look at where you need to get stronger in your life, whatever it is. Where do you need to get stronger? Where can you strengthen your game? Where are you weak? Mars retrograde will help you. It will help you think about where you can strengthen yourself. So whether it's something personal, whether it has to do with your finances, whether it has to do with how you comport yourself, Mars retrograde can get you to think, where can I get stronger? Where can I kind of reinforce things in my life? Okay, that's a positive thing, very positive thing. And we have Mercury in Libra now, and it can be a little more fair and balanced with how we can communicate with people and striking kind of an even Steven deal, which is a good thing. Okay, so work on those two things. And again, beginning of this week, there's some interesting possibilities for innovation and changing your emotions around. The emotional presets are hard. They're hard. I got into that before. There's this that happens. We see it, we react a certain way. This happens, we react a certain way. This happens, we react a certain way. It's like right now, the social order is so defined that the emotional presets are very narrow, very narrow. So a lot of us are operating in a very narrow bandwidth, whether people are wearing a mask, or you have to wear a mask, or there's certain protocol, or you're going to get angry, or you're going to get frustrated, or you're going to get resentful, or you're going to get sad, or you're going to get scared, right? These are all sort of the predefined emotional resets that we have right now. At the beginning of the week, you can break out of that. Okay, you can break out of it. This is what I was talking about earlier, which I wanted to point out. So over the next couple of days, right, do something different. If somebody asks you how you are, even if you're not feeling great, tell them you're feeling great. I'm great. Everything's great. Right? It's great. Really? Oh, the world's going to hell in a handbasket. No, really, it's great. I've made peace with it. It's great. Try some different emotional presets. Try some different emotions. Get out of the emotional presets. Okay? All right. There you go. I'm describing the rapture and then the Great Tribulation. Oh, well, there we go. There it is. Unintentionally speaking. I'm out of here. I'll see you tomorrow. 15 minutes of flame. We'll be back. I'm sure I'll have plenty to talk about. I'm going to have links here. So if you want to sign up for the webinar for next week, I'm going to have the other webinar for sale. I'm going to sell that thing. It's a really good webinar. I think like almost 3.5 hours of high-level relocation material. That'll be for sale on my website. And I still have spaces for the event. It's shaping up quite nicely. I think we've got about 25 people signed up, which is great. I think a nice cozy number would be around 40. That's what we had last time. If we exceed 40, I'll be thrilled. I think we're right around 25 right now. So we've got some space. We have some space and looking forward to it. And it's going to be a good time. It'll be energizing. It'll get you out of your emotional presets. All right, I'm Robert Phoenix. Bye for now. And see y'all tomorrow. Oh, tomorrow's Labor Day. All right, well, I'll figure it out. See you later.